I guess we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our webinar today. ITAM exposes the truth your ITSM can't see. So as introductions, I'm Julian Devlin. I'm the VP of IT Asset Management Product here at Dynamics. Later, Jason Shake, the Communications and Training Manager at Sassafras, will be showing you the product hands-on. But we're going to start by talking about it and going through some slides to begin. So as some of you may know, Team Dynamics is an IT service management and project portfolio management platform, and it has an underlying integration automation layer. It has always had some element of IT asset management in it, such as asset discovery, CMDB, and configuration management. But often customers would integrate with more advanced ITAM platforms to kind of get at the heart of what ITAM is and be able to really offer the full spectrum of that functionality. And today we can offer all of that with the acquisition of Sassafras. With that acquisition, we've brought a lot of ITAM functionality directly into the platform. So we're going to take a deeper dive into that area, IT asset management, that goes beyond CMDBs, CIs. So we're going to look at the hardware lifecycle management and software asset management that are part of that. And all of that together leads to enterprise cost containment. That's the outcome of using these tools together in this way. So first of all, right off the top, what is ITAM? So ITAM, the acronym again is IT Asset Management. But let's talk a little bit about what that means, because it's a term that gets thrown around a lot. It can mean a lot of different things to different people. So ITSM is, I think, fairly well understood. When someone says that, you know what it is. IT Asset Management, at some level, that just means keeping track of stuff. As far as asset management itself goes. So within your organization, you might have multiple tools that you would call asset management, ignoring for a moment the IT part. You might keep track of desks and chairs. You might keep track of, widely diverse assets like pipes and highways. But in the case of IT asset management, primarily that's going to mean computers and software. So even once you decide that's what it means, computers and software, at a simple level, you might kind of equate that with a CMDB, because again, a CMDB allows you to keep track of stuff like computers, stuff like software. But we like to kind of focus on the word asset. So generally speaking, asset means something that holds value. So think about your personal assets like a home, stock portfolio, anything like that. In the context of a business or university, again, asset might be something obvious like a building. It might be intellectual property. But again, generally, it's something that holds value. So within IT, computers and software actually do have a lot of value. You might not think about that every day. They might just be kind of a tool to achieve means to an end. But really, they have a lot of value. You do spend quite a bit on them. And by focusing on that value, you can save money. So before we get going, we wanted to do some audience poll questions. So we'll go ahead with the first one here. And the question is, what is the biggest challenge you face with your current ITAM solution? And we'll give everyone a few minutes to weigh in on this, but lots of different things. We've tried to anticipate the problems you might have. A very obvious one is a lack of visibility into usage. You might be having trouble tracking software licenses, how many you have, when they renew, what you're spending on them. You might have high costs associated with your current tools. And certainly we all like to automate. So manual processes might take too much time, whether those are in particular around your ITAM solution or process at the moment or other. Give everyone just a few more seconds there. Looks like we're settling in pretty quickly. So go ahead and look at the results. So it looks like the biggest answer here is difficulty in tracking software licenses. So not unexpected. Within ITAM, between hardware and software, certainly software is the kind of the more complicated, subtle, hard to understand without a tool that focuses on it. Couple of second answers are the lack of visibility into usage and manual processes taking too much time. So that all holds together. That is what we tend to see with our existing customers. And these are areas that we like to focus on within our tool to make things easier. So next question is, what % of software do you think is not really in use at your company today? And again, this is a question that kind of speaks to the complexity of software, to the fact that it's not often directly observable. So I think that often when we start talking to people, I have no idea is definitely a common answer, because without some kind of tool, some kind of platform that gives you this data, it may just be a complete guess. But we have also here 10%, 20%, 30%. So I'll be curious to see how many of you all choose those different categories. We'll give this a moment. So I'll go ahead and share those results. And again, not to my surprise, I have no idea wins the day. And that makes sense. As I mentioned, it just is something that you must have data in order to really have an idea. And beyond that, it looks like we're kind of a curve down from there. So 30% is the second answer, and 20 and 10% after that. So again, that all makes sense. That's fine. Don't feel badly. You are in good company with those sorts of answers. In fact, there's been a recent Gartner study that says 30% is the most plausible answer there. So on any given month, over 30% of the growing expenditure on software and cloud services will be unused. And that's a Gartner benchmark. So that's pretty amazing. I mean, I guess that we all have that sense, right? If we have no idea, it's probably high. It's probably not. We have no idea. And then it turns out to be 5%. So maybe that's not too surprising, but on the other hand, if you think about the size of your IT budget, 30% is a huge, huge number. So we're going to talk a bit more about that. So how to isolate that wasted expenditure. So we have a case study that we did with the University of Waikato, and they came to us. Their initial goal within ITAM was to focus on software, and basically they knew that there was going to be savings in software. What they were not thinking about was hardware at the same time. So hardware is kind of easy to think you understand. Again, I think of software as having a subtlety to it, and hardware, just buy it, it's sitting there, you know you have these computers. But even within hardware, there's a big room for saving money. So you might have someone sitting with multiple laptops that you bought for them, and we've lost track of them, or they're using them occasionally, but they really don't need them. You might have labs or shared use spaces where the sizing of those areas is just way too big based on actual demand. So all that really adds up a lot. So within Waikato, it's a university environment, and they had a lot of these shared labs. And basically within the first year, they pretty quickly identified unused computers and realized that they could save about $1 million just on the hardware alone. And you can see in this chart, so their labs were 1,200 computers, let's say, and they found that only 16% of them were getting used on average, which is super low. I mean, I think when you're designing a lab, you're always going to have some kind of extra headroom. You're never going to achieve 100% usage, but if you think about 16%, that's just a massive over allocation of resources. So they started to look at it and proposed computers that they didn't need, computers they could move from one space to another, to reorganize how those labs were laid out. Even things like looking at open hours when people actually need to access those computers. So with a combination of all that, they were able to achieve $1 million in savings. I think this was year one. And it's just really, it's low hanging fruit. It's easy. Once you have the data. Before you have the data, you might think that everything is exactly where you need it to be, and not understand the size of the issue. So as we were sort of alluding to, one thing that you're going to start to see is that IT asset management means different things to different people. And there's whole areas of other products that people kind of equate sometimes to IT asset management. So asset discovery is simply, exactly what the word says, discovering what those assets are, what's out there. And that is important. It's a necessary first step to any of this. And when you think of that asset discovery, you might be thinking a MDM like Jamf or SCCM. Even though it's not specifically discovery, it gives you a lot of discovery data. So all of those can be integrated, but really they just give the beginning of the data. They give the basics, the tactical data, and they kind of stop there. So in order to really get the complete set of IT asset management data, you need a tool that really focuses on that. So what all do we mean by advanced ITAM? So first of all, it would be an extensive view to hardware properties. Discovery tools might give you kind of a very limited set of properties. They might show you a name, a serial number, a MAC address. But really to be able to get an extensive view of exact OS version, OS install date, last user, last address, manufacturer, system components like sound cards, graphic cards. That's what we think of as a full set of hardware properties. Accurate daily updates is another good one too, because with a lot of discovery tools, you may come up with an initial data set, even make it available within your ITSM, and then it's just an idea that at some point in the past, we think that something existed with certain properties. But it's important to update that every day. So you need to be able to capture things like changes in RAM, disk that's getting full, a view into whether you intended to have a computer be used by a certain user, and then it turns out that other people are using it. All of those sort of things are changes in the environment that are normal, that happens within hardware environments, but you want to know about them. Even beyond changes, then you would want hardware utilization reporting. So you have a computer, you're able to see changes like you have plenty of disk space, but then is it being used? Who's using it? Is it being used every day? How long is it being used? Those sorts of answers are the ones that really tell you whether you need that computer. There's a good number of hardware lifecycle workflows. So certainly the obvious state of a computer is it's deployed, it's being used, sitting on someone's desk, it's sitting in a lab. But there's any number of other lifecycle stages that are important to be able to manage as well, like purchasing and retiring. So we'll talk about those a little bit later too. Software installs and usage tracking. So here's kind of our whole second layer beyond the computers themselves. What is the software that's installed? Can we track usage of that software so that we can see not just is it installed, but is it being used? Does it need to be installed? And then certainly the software compliance assessments. Can we say that we are compliant with our contracts with our vendors? Are we prepared if they come and they want to do an audit for that audit? Do we have the data we need? So we'll do another poll at this point. So just at a simple level, do you have an advanced ITAM solution in place today, based on what we've talked about so far? And while everyone's weighing in there, I'll say either answer is fine. We work with people who have nothing more than a spreadsheet. We work with people who have a very fairly advanced practice in place already, a whole team of people who are involved in that process. Go ahead and end the poll because it looks like we are converging on a pretty steady state here. So it looks like about 70% no, sorry, 78%, so about 3/4 no and one quarter yes. And again, I would say that's fairly typical. It's this is an area that doesn't immediately demand attention, but as soon as you start to put a practice in place, you do tend to see value from it. So going just back to the Gartner statistic of 30% waste, how would you know without an advanced ITAM product in place? How would you know that you were wasting that? And really, I think the broad answer is you wouldn't. You kind of do need some source of data to start to get to what that waste might be. So with an ITAM tool in place, you can see both the software asset management that the 30% figure speaks to, but even beyond that, you can save money on the hardware as well, as we saw with the Waikato case study. So let's dig in a little bit more to what the functionality is around both sides of this. So first, let's look at hardware. This is a diagram of a basic hardware lifecycle, and it might vary a little bit from this, but this is a pretty good benchmark. You kind of start by acquiring computers. Once you have them, you then deploy them, you put them into users' hands, into use. While they are deployed in use, you need to manage them in certain ways to make sure that they're being used well. And then even before you retire them, you'll start to plan for that retirement. So plan what you need to do with them next. And then ultimately they will get retired. Maybe they'll be redeployed. Maybe you'll start to acquire new computers and the cycle starts again. So looking a little bit more in detail each of these stages, acquisition stage, you're going to need to potentially import data and keep track of what you have stocked. It's probably uncommon that you would buy a computer and then immediately deploy it every single time. You probably do have a stock room. You have a stock of computers that you need to know that are there so that you can avoid buying more than you need to. During deployment, that's when an MDM or a device management product would be involved. You need to make sure that the proper software gets installed, make sure that the hardware is what you expect it to be. It has the properties that you think are there. And then you would want to keep track of the owner and location of that as you're deploying it. Again, the manage stage is often some of the most interesting because once it's out there and being used, you kind of don't have visibility unless you have a product that gives you that visibility. But when you have the visibility, you want to look at things like utilization. You might have a loaner pool that you need to keep track of, so it's sort of actively in use, but briefly kind of going in and out and being given to different people. If it goes missing while it's being managed, you want to be able to locate it. You want to be able to figure out why it's missing or where it is. During that time as well is probably one of the more active times that you would be using configuration management or ITSM, working with tickets against that hardware. But throughout that whole process, you would want to make sure that you're tracking OS and software upgrades, that everything you think is happening on that computer is in fact happening, and potentially enforcing software policies like keeping people from downloading and running things that they shouldn't. as you start to plan, this is where warranty dates come into play. And so having that easily accessible is a huge value. Often from those warranty dates is how you would set the replacement dates, and then you would start to forecast a hardware budget over multiple quarters, multiple years. And definitely at this point, if you're just implementing a tool for the first time, as you realize that you may have more than you need, this is the perfect time to right-size that environment based on the data, based on the utilization that you've seen through the manage phase. And then at retirement, you're going to re-image, potentially recycle, look at whether this is going to be used by a different part of the organization, or you're just going to replace it entirely. Copy any kind of manual properties you're using to track that asset, and watch for process loopholes. So that's a good high-level hardware view. So let's talk about software next. So the mission of software asset management, we like to think of it as these three very high-level things. Number one is, what do you have? So what do you have within the environment? What is there today, regardless of how it got there? Just what's in the environment. Forget about whether you bought it; it just ended up there somehow. What's out there? What are the levels? How many copies are where? The second part that you might have some better idea of to begin with is, what do you own? So what entitlements did you actually contract with vendors? What did you buy? How many did you buy? What were the metrics under which you bought? And then finally, what do you use? So certainly you can start to look at compliance just by the first two. What do you have? What do you own? Do they match? But it's equally important, if not more so, to know what you use, because that really is how you get to optimization. So while the vendors might care about compliance, you within your organization are really going to care about optimization, because that's where you can save money. So a big part of this that we keep kind of looping back to is usage reporting. Really, that's one of the most valuable aspects of IT asset management. So what all does that mean, and what does it give you? So it answers any number of questions. What's being used? So which computers are being used? What software is being used? But then on the flip side of that, and equally important, is what's not being used. So are there computers just sitting there, not being used at all? Are there software titles that have been installed, you've paid for them, but again, they're just sitting there. They're waiting for someone to use them, and no one needs to. So beyond kind of quantities and black and white, yes or no, is it being used? Who's using what? So which users are using a certain title? Are they users within one department or another? Is there a way that we can understand that usage pattern? How long are they using things? How often are they using things? Those both might be important, right? You might have someone a piece of software that doesn't get used more than once every month, but when it does get used, it's used for 2 days straight. Or conversely, you might have something used 5 minutes every single day. But having really detailed analytics around that lets you see how long, how often, and kind of make sense of, is it worth it? Do you need those licenses? Do the usage patterns make sense? Is there something you can do to change how that software is used, or hardware? Again, within a lab setting, that might be as simple as, when is a lab used? Do the open hours make any sense? Should they be changed? And finally, is the IT spend justified? That's a big question for every organization. It's really just, once you have all this data, you might make the decision differently than a different organization, but ultimately, it's something that you should always look at. Is the spend justified? So we're touching back on the Gartner study again. Up to 30% of software spend is unused software, and there's a whole series of problems with that that go from kind of obvious to less obvious. So at the very top, shelfware, software not being used, drives up renewal costs and limits budget flexibility. So that's kind of obvious. If you're paying for it, if it's not being used, that will be part of the budget. That will prevent you from buying other software that you would actually use. Second is the orphaned apps creating security vulnerabilities, governance gaps. So anytime something is installed, there is a potential security issue there. I mean, it's always a matter of evaluating that title and understanding any vulnerability that might exist. Even beyond that, it's something you have to support, right? If you have 150 software titles and you have users potentially using all those, maybe they're not. That's 150 titles that your IT staff has to understand, has to know how to install, has to know at least at a very basic level how to use, how to diagnose an issue. So that's a kind of a less obvious cost, but it's there. And again, with all of this, if you have a complete lack of visibility, then you don't really have a choice but to end up overbuying. And the more you're buying, the more that is there within the environment at all, the more you may have an audit exposure. So with software asset management, you can do any number of other things with this data too. So you might reclaim licenses. You might determine that you have certain licenses for users who don't need them anymore. They can be reclaimed. You can take those licenses you've already purchased and reallocate them. You can change your licensing level so that you have eliminated completely unnecessary licenses. And so as a whole, with all of this, all of the real-time usage data that you're gathering then supports data-driven procurement and renewals. One of the most obvious or kind of fun ways we see this is just a very simple question, right? So you have a really expensive software title that a user has, and renewal time comes, and you go to them and say, "Do you need this?" Almost always the answer is going to be yes, I need this, renew it. But having this data lets you say, well, gosh, you ran it for an hour over the last year. Are we sure you need this? It's a really nice way to just get on the same page as an end user without any kind of drama of whether something needs to be renewed. So to understand what SAM offers you, any number of steps along the way with your software. So it tracks your ownership of software, usage, and entitlements across the organization. And the entitlements is a good one to kind of point out too, because that can be simple. Maybe if you buy a site license, it's very simple. You have that site license, you can use it anywhere. It gets a lot more complicated when you have multiple departments buying the same title, buying in kind of separate blocks and increments, and you really want to picture overall what you end up with. That is a function of software asset management that can be hard to organize without specific software asset management tool. So from there, obviously, it helps you ensure that you're paying for what is actually getting used. Audit readiness, again, is a very important one, depending on what vendors you work with. You're just going to be in a much better position if you're ready for an audit before it happens than if you're kind of behind the 8 ball once it happens. We reduce risk of non-compliance and unexpected fines, and make better decisions for renewals, what software we might reclaim, how we're going to true up with a vendor. And so you can see really all of this goes around a theme of IT cost containment, whether that's kind of proactively making sure that we're ready for an audit, or reactively looking at usage data and making changes to how we're handling the software. And this last point too is very important. So when you have hybrid and remote environments, those only get more complicated, right? It becomes less clear what's out there and what sense to make of it and how to adjust software buying. But with the usage data, you can see what's truly happening. So another poll: what do you use for ITAM today? For those of you who do have a platform already. And this one has a good number of answers. The window on your screen, you might have to scroll down to be able to see them all. But we tried to include a lot of the common names that you may be using today. And even before the poll is done, I'm going to say I'm going to anticipate that Excel spreadsheet is probably going to come in pretty close to the front because it usually is. It's kind of the starting point that everyone moves through at some point until they have a tool specifically for this. Give that one more moment for anyone who wants to reply. And full. So yeah, not surprisingly, spreadsheet is fairly high in there, but the other category is fairly actually in first place at the moment. So I'd actually be really curious, maybe in chat, if anyone who answered other wants to put what that other tool is. I'd be curious about that because we try to include some of the obvious ones, and certainly are interested to hear what the other answers might be as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Jason, and we'll go ahead and take a look at our interface.
All right. Thank you, Julian. So when we talk about IT asset management, we're not talking about service management. What we're trying to do, and you might have worked with other methods of getting data into your Team Dynamics instance, for example, in the past, whether it's coming in from Intune or some other source. But when we talk about IT asset management, we're talking about, first of all, IT, and that can be hardware and software, computers, as well as mobile devices, and really any other kind of equipment like printers or keyboards and docking stations. And the goal is to get a complete view of that inventory, and then as well as a view of how it's being used or whether it's being used. So hardware and software, and then the usage tracking of both the hardware and software. And when we look at the Sassafras, or the ITAM product that was Sassafras and is now here part of Team Dynamics, we're really trying to do a few things. First of all, there's the inventory discovery and lifecycle management. So what is it? Where is it? Where along the lifecycle is it? Who has it? And then how do we retire it? How do we order it? And then there's purchase tracking, usage reporting, and then cost optimization. So one thing I'll show you here is that there is a purchases page where all those POs can be logged and linked to the individual assets themselves. There is usage reporting, again, login reports for hardware and usage reports for software. So you're not just getting an idea of what's out there, but you're finding out, is it being used? How many times was each software product launched? Who launched it? Who has it but didn't launch it? And then similar kind of data about the logins to the computers themselves. And that information helps with cost optimization. When it comes time to renew software, or when it comes time to refresh the hardware, you can go back and actually see how much it was used, not just how much time was it open, but actual foreground and background time. And then compliance and risk reduction when it comes to software and audit risk. So we'll talk about those things. I've only got a few minutes here, so I just want to make sure you know before we jump into the UI, I'm going to move really quickly. The goal isn't to give you that full walkthrough today, but certainly you can reach out to your CS manager if you have an interest, or if this seems interesting and exciting, and we can get you on for a more complete demo where we can ask and answer questions as we go. So jumping into the UI, this is, of course, a dashboard. And on this particular tab, we've got hardware inventory type information. Sassafras, or the ITAM tool, is it's an agent-based tool, very lightweight agent. It's 10 megabytes with less than 100 kilobytes of traffic per day. And you can see some hardware configuration type details here on this inventory dashboard, as well as some hardware usage type information. We can look at this usage tab on this dashboard, and it's going to show information about hardware and software usage. So this is recent utilization of hardware logins. We can see computers broken down by when the last login was. And you can even compare different locations here. Each user can have their own dashboard. It's role and scope based management. So users can have a high degree of power where they can add and edit and delete objects, or you can have restricted access to specific objects or features within the tool, like the loaner checkout module, so that users maybe can't make changes, but have access to running the reports and looking at the data. There's a lot of automation here as well. So whether it is discovering the software, running imports from Intune or Jamf, whether it is running the export out to Team Dynamics, so you can get a lot of this inventory information in your service management tool, or the usage tracking and scheduled reports and other automations and integrations we can talk about. But couple of examples of some of the ways you might use this. I can look at this high level view. So currently we see a view that isn't scoped to any particular area within the environment. We're just looking at the whole estate, and we can see computers broken down by warranty date or the replacement date. We can see this top software products based on the number of installs, or software that maybe is out there but isn't being used. And then down here, we see software usage data at the estate level. So we see Adobe Creative Cloud is the most heavily used product family. And on this side, we see software broken down by the actual executable or application. I can then scope this down. So if I want to look at a particular location, maybe this Adam's 4th floor location, and everything on the page updates, and I've got that zoomed in view to a particular room or office. And so it's easy to scope this down and get that more granular view. There are, I think, almost 100 of these widgets available to build out dashboards as needed. And then similarly, when we get into reports, I think last time I counted was 168 reports that you can start from to build out your report templates. But before we do reports, let's have a quick look at some of the inventory. So on this computers page, you can see that we've got some categories on the left side, including divisions that would let you kind of build out your computer organizational structure, dynamic filters that there's a lot of built-in ones, but you can also create filters to kind of filter down the view as needed. And this page is fully customizable. So the particular columns that I've added here are part of a saved view. And I've got multiple saved views that I can toggle between to use this for different use cases or organize the data in different ways. Right now, I've got things grouped by manufacturer, for example, and this is platform agnostic. So Mac, Windows, Chrome OS, Linux, servers, virtual machines, really any kind of environment, we can deploy that client to gather all the details. And it's really easy when you get the data in here to then do bulk edits. So I can select all within a group. I can do a quick edit and make changes to pretty much any fields I want manually as needed. And then, of course, this is the data that's available to push out into Team Dynamics. So it makes it really easy, whether you're doing manual edits or automated changes that are either discovered on the devices or imported from other locations. It's really easy to get those kinds of details updated throughout the environment. If we zoom into a particular machine here, just want to kind of give you a quick view of the kind of asset details that we capture. So you see all of the hardware configuration details, information about the last user, the last IP address, and the last login. as well as operating system level information. So we see the OS type, the version, the installation date. All of this kind of information can be really helpful to get into Team Dynamics for troubleshooting and ticketing and just inventory management. And then we can click on this asset tab. The fields that you see on this page are things that tend to not be discoverable by the agent on the computer. So a lot of times customers will either import this type of information from Team Dynamics or from Intune. We recently also released an inventory app that lets you go around and scan the asset ID and auto-populate a lot of the location information based on your location or the location of the device you're scanning from. So you can even populate lat and long from the scanning device. And then on software, so very brief explanation here. We take the agent and scan the storage of the device. And what that agent is going to report to the server is every single executable file or application file on a Windows or Mac computer or Linux. But that's a lot of raw data. So you can have a list of 3,000 executables on a Windows machine, for example, with the file paths and the identifiers and the published release dates and all the details about every single exe file. But that's too much to deal with day to day. So we take that a step further on the server, and we will normalize that into a list of software products that might be useful that you have installed on top of that operating system that you might want to keep track of. So on this computer, we see these software product families are there. Families are one step higher. If I show products instead of families, you'll see a product has a version number. You can have multiple different versions on a given machine, just depending on what particular collection of programs are there. So this is an even longer list than you might want to look at. So you can shorten that a little bit and just look at the overall product families that are there. I'm going to talk about usage tracking here in a second, and we'll look at a couple of reports as well. But just to get that general idea, there's the applications, which can be a very long list. There's the products, which are version specific, and that's done on the server side where we normalize all of that. And then there are the families, which makes it really easy to decide one time about which products you want to track usage for, and then you'll have all versions being tracked. And you don't have to come back every time a new version comes out and add it to the list. And then we can also track SaaS products as well. So the ability to not just track the installed applications, but also the web-based products that your users might be accessing and logging into. There's the ability to track those as well. We'll come back to software. I'm just going to jump really quickly down to two more tabs here, looking at an individual device. One is the purchase tab, where I mentioned the ability to add purchase records here, organized by PO. Purchases can be linked to software products or hardware products. And in this case, we can see that this computer is linked out to a purchase record. But you don't have to bring in all those purchase details. A lot of times customers don't want to bring in or don't have access to all those PO numbers. We still have a lot of details about the purchase of this asset that's a part of the asset record itself. We've got integrations that can pull in warranty dates and purchase dates from Dell and Lenovo and HP and Microsoft Surface. That kind of information can also come in from Intune or Jamf. And then things like the replacement date can be automated, and the cost can come in from the purchase or can be bulk edited or imported. And then the last thing I want to show you here is the history tab. So throughout the life cycle of each individual asset, whether it's a computer or a peripheral device, you're going to see any changes that have occurred to any of the hardware attributes that we walked through here. So things like the purchase date or the BIOS or the owner or the region or department. Any changes to those fields throughout the life cycle are recorded and logged and accessible both at the level of the individual asset as well as in reporting, where you can see that kind of stuff changed in bulk. And that's kind of a very brief walkthrough of computers. Devices, very, very similar. You can kind of think of that computers page as where anything with an operating system will go. So computers, mobile devices. Um, we don't have an agent for mobile devices, but a lot of times customers will import those for inventory purposes to get them into Team Dynamics. So your iPhones and iPads and Android devices coming in from Intune or Jamf, anything like that goes on the computers page because they've got an operating system, they've got RAM, they've got a processor, and the computers table has all those fields. Whereas on devices, that's where we see things like printers, monitors, cameras, or other kinds of networking devices. And we've got subtypes you can organize by subtype. You can keep track of all of those non-computer IT devices on this page, and it functions very similar once they're here to the way that your assets worked on the computers page, where you can do those bulk edits and grouping and customization of which columns are here. And then computers, as well as these devices, can all be pushed into the Team Dynamics side of things. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to jump to software, just talk a little bit more about software tracking, and then we'll look at a couple of reports and see if there's any questions and kind of wrap up. But again, very short on time with these kinds of demos during the webinar. So the goal is just to kind of give you that high level view, and then we can do a much deeper dive on a one-on-one call. So looking at software, I talked a bit about this at the individual asset level. Right now, we're looking at kind of an aggregated view. So these are all of the discovered software products organized by the install count. So I'm seeing software listed for how many copies are actually out in my environment. And then when it comes to tracking usage, it's as simple as just clicking yes or no on this page for each product. And it kind of allows you one time during initial configuration to go through everything that's been discovered and make that decision. And then in the future, if something's been installed for the very first time, the system will essentially prompt you with this green dot to let you know, hey, there's something new here you haven't decided on. And those will all show up automatically on this attention with this attention filter pre-selected. So it lets you know about newly discovered things, and you can come back and decide which ones you want to track. So again, we're looking at, for the most part, what we call product families, where you don't see a version number. This isn't broken down by individual application, but I can click through and see exactly which editions are part of this product and how many copies of each edition there are. So if I'm kind of trying to make sure that there aren't a bunch of old versions of software, then this is really helpful. I could click in and see the specific computers. I could select these and run a report to get a list of computers that have those older versions. And I can kind of keep track of that view of what's out there. But I can drill in a little bit further as well to this product and see exactly which applications are part of that product. So once I've made all those decisions about what I want to track, there are some features here that let me manage access to that software. That was the original use case of the Sassafras product was as a concurrent use license manager. It's not as big of a feature these days. All the functionality is still here, but for the most part, the publishers have taken over that question of how are you going to access the software, and for the most part, we find that customers are just trying to keep track of the assets, both in terms of what's installed and how much is it really being used. But keep in mind, we do have the ability to actually manage access to software. You can blacklist software. You can get alerts when software is launched that shouldn't be. There's all kinds of functionality around software asset management, in addition to some of this inventory type functionality we've been talking about. Next, let's jump over to some usage type information. So really quickly, if we look at these software product families and we want a high level view, I can come down to this reports page, and I've still got this specific location selected, and I'm going to click just to run a quick report to show us software usage at that product family level. So in this particular Adams fourth floor location, These are all of the software products that we've got usage for. And then expanding each one, we can see the specific users that have launched them, as well as the amount of time they've had them open, the number of times they've been launched. And in a real world environment, you would see foreground and background time. Our demo environment is not simulating idle usage, so it's all active. But we can get an idea of overall usage within this location, and then which users have used it and how much each of those users represents. I could have just as easily run this at the computer level and had a list of all the computers it was launched on. Instead of scoping this to a specific location, I could have ran it across the entire network. So it just gives you a basic idea of the kind of information we capture. And just to go one step deeper, for example, this is Creative Cloud usage. So this is that overall product level usage. And it's good to know who's used it, who's used Creative Cloud. But sometimes you want to dive a little bit deeper and see, well, are they really using the full suite? Or is this all one application or another within the overall product suite? So it's really easy to dive a little bit deeper here. I just select that Creative Cloud product to target it, and I can create a new report with the selection. And in this case, I want a program level report instead of a product level. And we're going to go with that same 90-day period and click run. And now we're targeting Adobe Creative Cloud as a product family, but we're presenting the data by application. So when this finishes, we're going to see basically that same Creative Cloud usage data, but now we see it broken down by exactly which applications were launched. And if I run a report like this, I see it's almost entirely Acrobat. There's a couple of different versions of Acrobat, but virtually all of those launches are Acrobat launches. There's a little bit of After Effects. There's a couple of launches of Dreamweaver totaling 17 seconds. But this is where that usage data can come into play and help you make decisions about that cost optimization. So very high level example. I'm keeping an eye on time. I want to wrap up here in the next minute or two and pass things back to Julian. So let me just show you one more report that can be helpful for hardware login type data. Again, there's 160 something reports in this tool. So we're really just looking at a couple here. But just as another basic idea, this is a concurrent login report in a specific location, or actually this is for all locations. I've just selected one to highlight kind of the most meaningful or interesting view. And what we're seeing is there's 27 computers in this location, and across the last 90-day period, we see a peak of 5 that we hit pretty regularly, but never more than 5 out of those 27 in use all at the same time. So this can be really helpful in a higher ed type environment where you've got computer labs and you're trying to figure out, do we have the right number of computers in this room before we go pay for a hardware refresh? This one's really helpful for that sort of thing. Now, again, there's so much functionality in this, and there really isn't time to dive into it. But just as a list of things that we can talk about if you're more interested in more information, there's a tool here for diving into the replacement of hardware and projecting out costs. There's a tool for checking equipment in and out. There is even a tool here to help you get control of your Windows 11 upgrades, where you can see all of your computers that are Windows 10, whether they're compatible with Windows 11, and if not, what exactly is missing or needs to be done. And of course, there's the Team Dynamics integration, as well as an entire library of other scripts and automations to pull in data from various sources like Azure or Intune or Jamf, and get data out into other systems as well. But with that, I'm going to wrap up, hand things back over to Julian, and definitely just reach out to us, your customer service manager, if you have an interest to learn more, and we'll be happy to get you a more complete demo. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So just a couple of minutes left. One thing I wanted to make sure to point out before we wrap up is there are some ITAM resources. If you click the resources icon in the Zoom toolbar, you should be able to get to these 3 resources that you see on this slide. So feel free to read more there. And then other than that, it's just a matter of whether we have any questions. And I saw two quick ones. One of them was, as our organization grows, how scalable is SaaSFRS, and does it support expanding our asset management capabilities without needing to overhaul our systems? So yes, we are very, very scalable. We've had many years of engineering where back years and years ago, that was critical to our success. And we've never kind of added layers upon layer that would change that at all. So our biggest single production instance, I believe, is supporting roughly 180,000 endpoints. And those are all endpoints that are reporting data in real time to the server. And beyond that, we have any number of customers who have a single server serving clients or endpoints globally. So across 6 different continents, computers just all over the world reporting back to one server. So very lightweight, it's meant to be completely invisible at the endpoint, and certainly efficient for reporting as a whole on the server. And then another question, how does integrating SaaSFRS with Team Dynamics' ITSM platform enhance our overall service management capabilities, particularly in terms of incident resolution and service requests? So basically what we do is put all of the a good amount of data directly into work management. So you would have records for each of your assets. You would be able to see the different properties of those records, and you would know that they were up to date. So again, things like, how much RAM does a computer have? Is it enough to support running a certain application? How much disk-free space is available? What's the exact OS version? When was that OS installed? These are all data points that are great to have directly when you're working with a ticket to help you understand what factors might come into play with that, whatever the problem the user might be having is. And beyond that, we can also show that list of installed software, again, directly within work management. Certainly all of the usage metrics, that's all great to have. You would kind of go choose those specific reports within the SaaSFRS UI. But again, a lot of the data, we're just putting it there directly within work management where you'd be working with the ticket. So it makes it really, really powerful to be able to have more information at your fingertips. And I think one last question I'm seeing in chat, has the integration into Team Dynamics changed since the acquisition? There are not big visible changes yet. We've been working on some optimization to make that sync happen more quickly. And then certainly we are working on some improvements to that will be kind of visibly different that we'll be announcing within the coming months. So we're excited for when we can share those with you. I think that's pretty much it and pretty much all we have time for. So thanks everyone for joining today. And I believe, as Samantha mentioned, the recording will be available by email within a few days. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a great day.